and welcome. You're with us here on Mega MNCs, and we have a very special guest yet again on the show this week, Neeraj Govil, Area Vice President, South Asia for Marriott Hotels. Now remember, Marriott is the largest branded hotel chain in the world. And of course, after the big merger that we saw about 3 years ago, everyone is incredibly curious to know how the strategy is panning out and really how they're planning to really maintain and build on the mantle that they've overtaken. Neeraj, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So first of all, how's it going? How's it going sort of being here in India in, what is being tipped as being the biggest growth market in the world currently? Is it all that it's being made out to be?
Well, it's going really well. We began our first operations here in 1999 with the opening of the Goa Marriott Resort and Spa, a hotel that still does exceptionally well today. And fast forward 20 years on, we are at 118 hotels here in India. So we've had a great growth story. We're now present in over 50 locations. We have 16 brands here in India, spread across the different segments, which we term as luxury, premium, and select.
Right.
We also operate over 24,000 hotel rooms now in the country, and about 350 restaurants and bars.
I love that you have all these numbers on the tips of your fingers, right?
So the growth has been terrific, but I think there's more to it than just the growth of hotels, right? I think over the years we've built some phenomenal partnerships. We've built some great long-standing relationships within the industry, with the fraternity. Now we have built some great alliances. We've grown phenomenal talent base. In fact, if you look at most of our leadership team here in India today, they've all begun and grown their careers with Marriott over the years.
Right.
And finally, I think the important thing to point out is the fact that we have done a lot for the community as well. If you look at most of our hotels where they operate in, there is a tremendous amount of work that is being done in the local communities by the hotels.
Okay. Fantastic. So firstly, just put it in the global context for us, and then we'll get into the segments and some of the brands like you're discussing. But just first put it into context. How important is the Indian market for the global company?
So extremely important. India is the market with the second largest number of hotels after China and Asia Pacific. So it's a very important market for us. And I say that because if you do a simple back of the envelope calculation, India has 118 hotels versus 7,000 that the company has. So proportionately, it seems off, it seems minuscule. But the reality is we don't look at the market that way. India is a critically important market for us for a number of reasons. One, the sheer potential that India brings to the table, right? If you look at India today, we have by most estimates, about 130,000 hotel rooms. Which is 1/10 of what China has and a fraction of what you find in Western markets, right? So there is that potential. The second is the ability to grow this across all segments in the industry. So we've got potential to grow in every single segment that we operate in. Third, obviously, is India is this treasure trove of talent. We have a number of Indians today who love what they do, understand hotels, are great business managers, and are doing this across the different markets that we operate hotels in. A lot of our hotels across the globe are managed by Indians today. And finally, there's the Indian outbound segment. As Indians continue to travel outside of India, it's important that they understand and work with our brands in India so they can sort of stay at our hotels overseas.
So a couple of questions on the back of that. So many brands and so many homegrown brands are actually looking at global markets, whereas you continue to push ahead in India itself. As you said, there are multiple segments that you cater to. Is there also a challenge within that, especially in cities or markets where you have, let's say, multiple hotels or properties within close distance to one another? How are you managing to build a clear differentiation between the brands?
So we see, we get asked this question all the time, and we see the distinct advantage that we have vis-a-vis most of the competitors in the sense that we have all these brands that we can play with. Our bouquet today includes 30 brands globally, 16 of which are present in India. And as markets in India continue to grow, you are now seeing the emergence of micro markets within specific cities, right? So you're seeing a lot of these markets grow. And as traveling becomes an issue, you have more propensity for growth. So if you take cities like Bangalore, for example, where we today have 17 hotels, our RevPAR in numbers, our market share numbers continue to grow, right? And we believe that a point of difference is giving the customer the ability to choose, right? The question is, do we have too many brands? And the answer to that is, I think in today's world, size, scale, and choice matters. Most of our brands are really well established. There is an upfront investment made into these brands. And if you look at these brands, they are really well liked and well entrenched in with our customers. So having the ability to offer all this choice, where customers can actually choose a brand based on their lifestyle, based on their preferences, based on their reason for travel, is an advantage to us. And that's how we see it. And we're seeing people travel between the brands based on their reason for travel. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of that happen across the board, and we believe that having all these brands spread across the geographic expanse of India is actually an advantage.
So that also bodes the question on the path to profitability. Obviously, you have scale to your advantage here, but nonetheless, and it's the same question one would put to the aggregators who are also claiming to be the largest, and of course the model is different there. But what is the path to profitability? And also, again, let's focus here on India.
So again, the way we look at it, it's about driving and maximizing the top line synergies we can get with our scale, and then pushing down costs as a result, again, of those synergies that we now have. So scale is important in all of this, right? At the end of the day, we've got to make sure that we are able to get the right rates here in India. I think one of the common themes that most hoteliers here will tell you is we need to see rates lift in the country, right? Now, again, rates are a reflection of demand and supply, right? And you see a number of markets, take Mumbai, for instance, where it's hard to get a hotel room on a weekday, right? But you can still book the best hotels in Mumbai for under $200, right? So I think there's a tremendous amount of upside that we will see in the coming years as far as rates go, and that'll flow down directly to the bottom line. Having said that, we've got to make sure that we continue to keep a close eye on escalating costs, right? I think today we benefit from labor costs being very reasonable as compared to most other developed economies. That has to change at some point in time. And we have to make sure that as hoteliers, we don't let that get away from us, right? So we've got a plan. Our productivity levels have to be relooked at. That's something that we got to keep a close eye on. We got to make sure that our productivity levels start to get up to the levels you find in other mature.
When it comes to the cost management side of it, because India's a tough market pricing-wise.
It is. And I'll tell you this, I think at the end of the day, we are in a cyclical business. When you look at most of our hotels over time, you go through cycles, right? And I think when you look at our ability today with the distribution we have and post the merger, the brands we now have, the advantage we have today is to be able to leverage the benefits of that scale, but more importantly, build in cost efficiencies into our operations, right? When you're buying a product for 100 hotels, you can get a very different price vis-a-vis buying it for 10 hotels. So we are seeing those advantages when it comes to costs, efficiencies, and synergies across our hotels. I think the other important thing to remember here is it is important that we build a point of difference between the different brands. So one of the things we've been very focused on is creating a specific, clear identity for every single brand in every single market, so that a customer can gravitate towards that brand. It's important to have that point of difference. And today, when you look at a number of our brands, you can see how a St. Regis is very different from a W to a JW Marriott or a Sheraton, for that matter, right? So building those points of difference, avoiding what we call a brand blur, is very important to our business.
Obviously, it was perpetuated with the fact that you've also had a huge increase in the bouquet of brands post the merger. Now, there was an expectation that some of the trendiness associated with some of the Starwood names would rub off on the Marriott culture, which hasn't happened. Why is that? Is that a conscious move? What is the kind of culture you are trying to shape overall now with the consolidated group?
Well, I'm glad you say it hasn't happened, and that's a big ringing endorsement for us. Okay. I think when the merger took place and when we announced the acquisition of Starwood, there was this real concern that Marriott was more consistent. There was more around us being able to deliver a certain product in a certain way, while the Starwood brands were perceived as being much more trendy and appealing to a different subset of customers. I think part of the reason that you haven't seen this happen is because of the fact that we were very clear about how we went about this. One of the things that we did immediately here in India after the merger was what we termed as cross-pollination. We moved a lot of people from the legacy Starwood hotels into legacy Marriott hotels and vice versa, right? Because at the end of the day, we were both American companies, both fierce competitors, and as we moved people from one organization to the other, there was a real appreciation for how they went about doing what they did, right? So I think it built mutual trust and respect between the two legacy organizations. The other thing we did is we kept the organization firmly focused on the future, right? So we talked a lot about how this would be an investment into the future, right? We celebrated the past and focused on where we were going to go in as organization as the future. And both of them both of those measures sort of held us in good stead. I think broadly also when you looked at it, the distribution that we had and the number of openings that we had allowed us to ensure that most people within our organization were absorbed in some role or the other in the new combined entity, right? So it was a cause for celebration in many ways. We understand that the value of buying Starwood was in making sure that we retained the identity of many of their brands, right? That was what the appeal was, and there was a concerted effort to make sure we retained that appeal, while at the same time brought about the consistency that Marriott has been known for and renowned for.
Which of the brands do you feel have the most potential for the Indian market?
So we are seeing tremendous amount of growth across all segments. Now, if you look at our pipeline, future pipeline, more than 50% of it is skewed towards the select service segment that we have. So a lot of these are tier 2, tier 3 markets, and as a result, most of them are in the select space in that segment. So brands that are really well established are obviously the ones in demand in these segments. But our commitment here is to sustainable growth. Okay? At the end of the day, we have to make sure, being an asset-light operator, that we find the right brand for the right location. Our feasibility team today does a lot of work on making sure, with the data that they have, on making sure that we put the right brand in the location where it's more likely to be successful, right? We do a lot more diligence now in assessing an owner's ability to understand our business and also the ability to execute the project. And finally, our global design teams get in way ahead of time right now and make sure that we are able to execute a project in line with what the brand specs are. We try and avoid unnecessary extravagance. I think in the past we've had cases where we've gone out and built hotels to feed egos, and that then puts a lot of stress on the asset even before we open the asset, right? So there is demand for most brands, and again, I believe that there is a consumer and a development need for most brands in the market today. There is a segment we can fit these brands in, and the important aspect is to really conduct a detailed feasibility to understand demand and supply metrics in these markets that we go in. Having said that, the shorter answer to your question was, it does appear that as we go into tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 markets, the select brands are what are seeing more demand in those markets. Tier 1 markets, resorts, will continue to see premium and luxury hotels open over the next few years.
Neeraj, you've painted the picture, and I wanted to get a sense of, how you're continuing to also sign on new properties. You're working with the asset-light model here. So firstly, talk to us about the merit in that, and then I also want to go into some of the challenges you face with that, especially dealing with owners and, in the Indian market specifically.
So we've, as you correctly said, we employ the asset-light model here. Now, this is a model that Marriott introduced decades ago and has worked really well for us outside of India and done exceptionally well in India too, right? We wouldn't have been at the number of hotels we are today if we didn't have the asset-light model. So essentially, the way we work is we bring in our expertise in the form of management contracts and franchise agreements, right? So we have two forms that we employ here in India. And essentially what we do is we partner with real estate developers, many of whom we built great relationships with over the years, and we essentially bring in quality when it comes to sales, revenue, and reservation capabilities. We bring in our global distribution in the form of loyalty programs and a sales team. We bring in well-established brands, great loyalty program, and then bring in brand standards and the requisite training modules that allow the talent pool to perform really well. And we employ this because building a hotel in India from scratch involves a lot, right? I mean, you need about anywhere between 35 and 70 permits and licenses. There is obviously the cost of land acquisition. There is the requisite delays here in India in construction. And for a global operator that operates in so many different countries, it's not the most feasible growth model, right? So we partner with real estate developers, and we do what we do best, which is run the business of hotels. Now, the asset-light model has to be accompanied by great operational execution. You can't be a preferred choice when it comes to operating a hotel if you don't have great results to back you up. So it's important that they go hand in hand. The asset-light model has to be backed up by phenomenal delivery on the ground in terms of execution, in terms of results. And our growth story today is a combination of both. It's a combination of the trust that these partners have reposed in us over the years. I think the biggest endorsement for us is when you have an existing owner come back and say, I want to do more hotels with you. And we have a number of them who've done that. So the real estate model, the asset-light model works really well in conjunction with great results.
Do you find the market is also very competitive right now when you are trying to sign on some of these new hotels, particularly in newer towns, the tier 2, tier 3 towns?
It is. It's gotten a lot more competitive. And that's great, right? Because it gets everybody to kind of up their game. But this is a time, I think, when there is heightened expectations in terms of what delivery means today in today's market. And this is a time when you almost have to go back to your core strengths and implement the strategy that you need to be looking at from a broader perspective. So what we've done is we have made sure that we've made changes to the organization that support our strategy. And essentially, I'm reasonably confident that the strength of our brands today, the new rollout of Bonvoy, which is our loyalty program, our steadfast focus on establishing food and beverage reputation, which is critical here in India to the reputation of your hotels. And finally, and most importantly, our incredible talent pool will see us through this time and drive preference to our hotels. Yeah. Now, we've made a lot of decisions in the last year and a half that we believe will set us up for success when it comes to dealing with these changes in the market. One of them has been that we have decided to consciously push resources and accountability into the markets that we operate in. So it's not run out of one office today. Today we operate 3 offices in India. We have an office in Bombay, in Delhi, and we just opened an office in Bangalore now. So we have folks that are in these markets, running those markets, making decisions for those markets because they understand the nuances that apply when you operate in those markets, right? Okay. So we want to be agile, we want to be nimble. We don't want to be this large organization that's governed out of a corporate office where decision making is an issue. So we've done that. We've made significant changes to our national sales organization. So one of the things we've done is we have added a lot of muscle to this organization. We've added resources. It is now spread across 33 locations in India, selling for Marriott in India. And we've done significant amount of work in investing and building into a digital marketing arm here in India, which is where I believe the future game will be played out. So we've made a lot of changes, and I'm quite confident that we are well positioned to grow our market share in the years to come here in India.
Okay. Challenges, Neeraj, specific to the Indian market. I do want to hear a little bit more because, you touched upon some of the things that, hoteliers deal with on ground. But nonetheless, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you in terms of how we could see things improving further down the road. Because right now it seems to be all about, the ease of doing business.
So we've, individually as a company here, as an operator here in India, and collectively as a fraternity, there are a number of asks that we have made of government to facilitate ease of doing business here in India. I think first and foremost, top of the heap for me today would be that the government relooks at the whole GST regime at the moment. We have enough and more data to prove that the 28% and 18% GST that's being levied on hotels is excessively high. It puts us among the highest in the world. And it really makes India uncompetitive when it comes to destinations, even within Asia Pacific. You find most of the countries levy anywhere between a 3 and a 10% GST. So at 28 and 18, that makes us uncompetitive. And the result is we're already seeing plenty of meetings and conventions that would have happened in India actually moving overseas. Because it's just easier to get to those places now. And with the difference in the GST, that gives them a lot of disposable income to plan their events in other locations. So we've made a number of requests for the government to review this, and hopefully we should see that happening at some point in time. The other bit is around streamlining, I would say, the regulatory regime around licenses and permits. And we touched upon that earlier on. But to have to go anywhere between 35 and 50 or 55 licenses, depending on where you're opening the hotel, results in a tremendous amount of delays. So we'd like to see that being more streamlined, more time-bound. I think there needs to be a time frame by when a license should be issued, because this just raises the cost of borrowing and the cost of building the asset. And I think third, we welcome everything the government's doing with e-visas. The question is, can it be expanded, right? Can it be made available to more countries? Can we look at 180-day visas instead of 30-day visas? Can we look at multiple entry instead of single entry? And can we make sure these visas are given quickly? Because again, we want India to be open and easy to get to as a destination, right? So there are a number of asks, but I think these would be the top three in terms of ease of doing business. There is the usual SEIS bit. There is the infrastructure status bit that we talk about from time to time. But these would be the three things we would ask. Having said that, I do want to say I think we are pleased that the government has focused on tourism and understands the potential and opportunity that we have here in India with tourism. I know there's a ton of work going on to make to get more foreign tourists into India, and we will continue to support those measures. Anything that is that has a positive impact on the investment potential and the employment potential here in India. Working with government set up committees and forums to making sure we exploit that. And I think we need to be also sharing the voice of our owners, right? The ones that actually build the hotels with the government, and explain to them some of the difficulties that they face. I mean, this whole point about licenses stems from there, stems from the frustration of having to, build all these.
Let's focus on the big headline that Marriott has, or the big claim, which is, of course, that it is the largest in the world. When it comes to India, we have a few competitors that are wanting to give you a run for the money, or even non-traditional players, like an Oyo, for example. And while I can kind of anticipate your response to that, also seeing your expression, I still want to ask you, because in global markets particularly, an Airbnb, for instance, does also have some premium offerings. Yes. Do you find the growth of some of these players in aggregators in the hospitality space something that you are tracking, monitoring, even if you're not seeing them as a necessary threat at the moment?
Yeah, so I think we have a healthy respect for the aggregators and the other competition. Yeah. The good news about all of this is there's a lot of unstructured inventory that's being brought into a more structured space right now as a result of the aggregators, right? So I think there is, if you look at India today, there's enough and more potential for everyone to grow. If you just compare India to the rest of the world, Indian hospitality can grow for decades at a frenetic pace, given the lack of supply we have and the demand factors that clearly will be in our favor in the years to come. So take Airbnb, for instance. Their biggest market, if I'm not mistaken, is Goa, where they have the maximum number of inventory here in India. And they've had a plethora of new accommodation sites, new accommodation options on their sites in Goa. The reality of it is it hasn't impacted our business at all. Everyone's continuing to grow because there is demand in that space. I think people that want hotels and understand that they're looking for a particular offering will be able to get that, in that space. Having said that, Marriott now in other parts of the world has gone into the Airbnb space. Okay. We've recently launched Marriott Villas and Homes by Marriott, which is sort of our version of that, but tied in with our loyalty program, which is Bonvoy, right? So I think there is enough and more potential. The good news is a lot of this is now going to be structured. We'll have data around how all these all these offerings kind of play out in the months to come. But it's important to watch that space, and it is reflective of the fact that we're constantly evolving as a consumer and as a market here in India.